Could you imagine if the Buffalo Bills didn't pick a wide receiver in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft? Well, we're going to explore that today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, folks, it's time for another wide receiver conversation, and this time a little bit different of a conversation. I've been studying the NFL draft for over 20 years. And if there's anything that I've learned, it's that you should never speak in absolutes when it comes to the NFL draft. The NFL draft is unpredictable. It's never completely chalk. And even if you think there is a clear and obvious thing that a team should do, they don't always do that thing. And so with all the conversation surrounding the Bills and adding a wide receiver, literally our last 6 and 7 of the last 8 episodes have been mostly wide receiver focused on this podcast. I wanted to attack the conversation from a different angle. And that angle is, what if the Bills do not draft a wide receiver on night 1 of the 2024 NFL Draft? Let that sink in. Now let's explore it. First of all, the outrage would be significant. And with that in mind, I want to get ahead of the conversation by discussing it today. So let's explore all the different dynamics to consider if we went to bed on April 25th and Josh Allen doesn't have a new weapon. So if the Bills don't draft a wide receiver on night 1 of the 2024 NFL Draft, so the first round, that means one of 2 things did happen. Number 1, the Bills drafted a player at a different position, not receiver, or the Bills traded out of the first round. That's it. They either drafted a player at a different position or they traded out of the first round. So let's start with they traded out of the first round, and then in the second half of our conversation, we'll get into the idea of them drafting a player at a different position. Earlier this week, in one of our many wide receiver conversations, I explored the possibility of not only trading all the way up into the top 10 for one of those big 3 receivers, Harrison, Neighbors, or Odunze, but I also talked about trading out of the first round. So why does that idea, the idea of trading out of the first round, have merit? Well, number 1, you get appropriate value, or you potentially could get appropriate value. Every single NFL draft board is different. There is no such thing as a true consensus. Not among media and certainly not among teams in the NFL. So if you think there are X amount of first-round receivers, that's great. That's what you think. I promise you, you can get a lot of different answers. Specifically, if you asked all 32 NFL teams how many first-round wide receivers they have, I promise you it's not the same number. There's a lot of variance there. I personally have 4 wide receivers graded in the first round. And then I'm going to have likely around 12 more that have day 2 grades. And the Bills are picking 28th overall. And to me, it's very unlikely that a wide receiver with a first-round grade for the Bills will be available. So first of all, acknowledge that. In any draft, you very rarely have 25, 30 first-round grades. You usually have 15 to 20. So the likelihood of one of those 15 to 20 being available at 28, pretty unlikely. So if you're boxing yourself in to picking a wide receiver, which I think is silly despite the need given the unexpected nature of the draft like we've already discussed and the overall depth of this wide receiver class, you still have to be mindful of value and you have to be mindful of your process in stacking the board. What's the whole purpose of going through stacking and evaluating players if you're just going to lock yourself into doing one thing? Let's make this practical. Let's say you personally find yourself in a position where you need to acquire a new vehicle for whatever reason, and it's a major, major need for you. Are you going to go to a car dealership and force yourself to purchase a car at that location? Maybe. If you find a great deal that you love, you buy the car. But if you don't find a great deal that you love, there are dozens of other car dealerships near you that you can explore. So if the right opportunity for a wide receiver is there at 28, then take it. If not, let's go somewhere else and make sure that we're getting a value that we're comfortable with. The depth of this wide receiver class is outstanding. And I think this is a very important and with the Stefon Diggs gone, it opens up more in the way of types of wide receivers that make sense. Before it was, all right, what are they missing? Can they get a size guy? Can they get a vertical threat? The answer right now is they need all kinds of stuff at wide receiver. And that opens up the possibilities, in my opinion. So that first talking point is rooted in getting appropriate value and understanding the depth of the class. Now, speaking of the depth of the class, my second point really leans into that. So number two, drafting a wide receiver in the first round isn't the only way to find a meaningful wide receiver in the draft. I repeat, drafting a wide receiver in the first round isn't the only way to find a meaningful wide receiver in the draft. Yesterday on Twitter or X or whatever you want to refer to it as, I tweeted out or I posted a list of the top 10 highest paid wide receivers in the NFL right now in terms of average annual salary. And I also noted where they were drafted. And so I want to give you that list right now and talk about it. So the highest paid player or the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, Tyreek Hill, 5th round pick. Number 2, Devontae Adams, 2nd round pick. Number 3, Cooper Kupp, 3rd round pick. Number 4, A.J. Brown, 2nd round pick. Number 5, DK Metcalf, 2nd round pick. Number 6, Deebo Samuel, 2nd round pick. Number 7, Michael Pittman, 2nd round pick. Calvin Ridley, 1st round pick, number 26 overall. Number 9, Terry McLaurin, 3rd round pick. Number 10, Stefon Diggs, 5th round pick. Now, I already lived this Twitter discussion yesterday. I know that big money is coming for first-round receivers like Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith and Brandon Ayuk. I fully understand that. But I also fully understand that big money is coming for T. Higgins and Nico Collins and Amon-Ra St. Brown and George Pickens. Higgins, a 2nd-round pick. Collins, a 3rd-round pick. St. Brown, a 4th-round pick. Pickens, a 2nd-round pick. So the point being, there is very clearly a proof of concept of finding meaningful wide receiver talent outside of the first round. The point being, there's no reason to panic. You can find impact well beyond the first round, and there's plenty of examples of it. And the depth of the class can and should work in your favor. I'm not having this conversation with you right now to sell you on the idea that the Bills should not pick a wide receiver in the first round. I am not saying that at all. I'm exploring the possibility of this not happening and what we need to be mindful of if that is the case. I want the Bills to draft a wide receiver. Like, don't get it twisted. I want a meaningful wide receiver or two added to this mix. I want that badly. But I want to attack these conversations from every angle, and it's a very worthwhile use of our time to consider the idea if the Bills don't pick a wide receiver in the first round. And so I've given you my first two talking points. I have so much more to get to in this entire conversation in just a moment. I'm going to tell you about another team that has lots of exciting talent, young talent at wide receiver that was not drafted in the first round. That's coming up on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, I teased that there's another team out there that has an exciting, deep, talented, young wide receiver core, and none of it was acquired through the utilization of a first-round draft pick investment. And I'm talking about the Green Bay Packers. Look at the Green Bay Packers. Everyone is buzzing about Jordan Love and all of his young weapons, which is funny because for so long, the narrative with Aaron Rodgers was all about how they never took a wide receiver in the first round. Yeah, they had Devontae Adams. Let's not forget that, like an elite player, but they never took a wide receiver in the first round. But the Packers right now arguably have the best combination of depth, talent, and youth at the wide receiver position in the entire NFL. The best combination of depth, talent, and youth at the wide receiver in position in the NFL belongs to the Green Bay Packers. They got 4 good-looking young wide receivers in Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, and Dontavian Wicks. Not to mention 2 good young tight ends in Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. None of those were first-round picks either. So let's look at this. Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs were picked in 2022. Watson was a second-round pick. Doubs was a fourth-round pick. And then the next year in 2023, they drafted Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks. Reed was a second-round pick. Wicks was a fifth-round pick. So they double dip in back-to-back years. No first-round pick invested. They have pick 34 and 132 in 2022 invested in receivers. 2023 pick 50 and pick 159. This is a pretty good blueprint to take a look at. And it's a really good proof of concept as well. That quartet of Reed, Doubs, Watson, and Wicks. In the rookie season for 2 of them last year, and the second season for the other 2, in Jordan Love's first season as a starter. Remember that context. 2 of them rookies, 2 of them second-year players. Jordan Love's first season as a starting quarterback, they combined for 2,470 yards and 25 touchdown receptions. Let's compare that to the Bills' top 4 wide receivers in 2023. Keeping in mind, it's Josh Allen, a well-established elite NFL quarterback with established weapons in Stefon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. The Bills' top 4 wide receivers combined for 2,690 yards and 18 touchdowns. So 7 less touchdowns and 220 more yards. And then again, apply the context of comparing 2 rookies, 2 second-year players, and Jordan Love in his first year as a starter against Josh Allen with established players like Stefon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. I like the proof of concept here. So if they don't pick a receiver in the first round, maybe the double dip in the second and fourth round, not a bad idea. Worked out real well for the Green Bay Packers. Now, the last point that I want to get into under this, they trade out of the first round And then we're going to get into if they pick a player at a different position. The last thing I want to say here is that the NFL draft is not the only way to acquire a wide receiver. Right? I mean, like, of course they could pick one in rounds 2 through 7, but like just generally speaking, we have to keep in mind that the NFL draft is not the only way to acquire a wide receiver. And the availability of players changes post-draft based on what happens during the draft. Guys can get cut. Guys can become available for trade. You get to OTAs and training camp, and all of a sudden holdouts happen. Like, things change. All of a sudden, some team that has a good wide receiver core drafts a wide receiver, somebody comes available. So that could happen post-draft. Also, there are some current free agents. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of needle movers here, but there's plenty of opportunity in this Bills passing game for targets to be absorbed. Odell Beckham's out there. Tyler Boyd, Hunter Renfrow, Michael Gallup, DJ Chark. There's some other intriguing, like, specialist type players like a Jalen Guyton or Jamal Agnew. So you get one of them plus a rookie wide receiver at some point in the draft that's not the first round. All right, you're getting somewhere. So just remind yourself, like availability, while you might not love that current list of available players, things do change with the NFL draft and just the nature of what happens afterwards where, hey, maybe somebody's all kinds of slighted and feels disrespected that they picked a receiver and they went out of town. Like, things can happen. I'll give you a random note here before I dive into the idea of the Bills picking a player at a different position in the first round. If there's like a modest swing that I would be willing to take for a wide receiver, I'd call Carolina about Terrace Marshall Jr. 2021 second round pick out of LSU, 6'2", 205 pounds, 4.40 40-yard dash at that size, RAS score of a 9.75. He's a big-time athlete. He was with Joe Brady, of course, the Bills offensive coordinator at LSU in 2019 with a crazy receiver core. Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase were the 1 and the 2, and then that year Marshall was the 3. He had like 13 touchdowns. Then the next season, when everybody was gone from that 2019 LSU team, whether it was Joe Brady, Joe Burrow, Chase, Jefferson, they're all gone. And so Marshall had a chance to be the number 1 receiver. It was very productive, and then he got injured. Had 10, I think in 7 games, like 10 touchdowns and 700 yards, something like that. And for Terrace Marshall in Carolina, it hasn't come together yet. And that's not unexpected given how crappy of a situation it's been in Carolina, especially on offense when it comes to their coaching, their quarterback situation, their offensive line. They've had so many problems, and Terrace Marshall has had his own injuries. So now Marshall is entering year 4, and I'd give him a call. I'd offer one of those 6-round picks that the Bills have and see if Terrace Marshall could become part of your opportunities in 2024. You know, modest expectations, right? You're certainly mindful that in 3 seasons, he's not really accomplished much in the NFL and has been a disappointment for them, but you apply the context. He's still very young. He's a very young player. You know, maybe that's a modest swing. You pair him with a 2nd-round pick, and you got a little something here to go with for your wide receiver core. Just spitting some ideas out there. So I went pretty deep here on, well, what if they trade out of the first round? What possibilities could exist? And in just a moment, I'm going to continue this conversation by considering the idea of the Bills picking a player in the first round, but it not being a wide receiver. We're diving into that here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, welcome back. So we're exploring what if the Bills don't draft a wide receiver in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft. We've established already that it means one of two things did happen. The Bills traded out of the first round, or they drafted a player at another position. And we've fleshed out the idea of trading out of the first round. Now, let's consider if they picked a player at another position. So first of all, everything we just discussed about wide receiver talent and opportunities outside of the first round immediately applies. So if they pick a different position in the first round, step one is to remind yourself of everything we just detailed. And also, if this happens, don't just not like whatever non-wide receiver they drafted simply because they weren't a wide receiver. Too often, I think people fall into wanting a specific outcome in the draft, and when that doesn't happen the way they prefer it, they're mad and disappointed. I started this conversation by elaborating on the unpredictability of the NFL draft. So marrying yourself to specific outcomes is setting yourself up to be disappointed. I highly encourage you to not do this to yourself. So that's number one. Number two is, while wide receiver is surely the most glaring need on this roster, there are other meaningful needs. And I know that everyone sort of has a deaf ear to anything that's not wide receiver, but there are other needs. Defensive line, offensive line, safety all come to mind. Look at the defensive line and the edge position in particular. Talk about room for impact. I love Greg Rousseau, but what in the world are you getting out of Von Miller this year? AJ Epinesa, I'm excited that he's back, but is he really a number two? Or is he more of a 2.5/3? You have room for impact at a premium position like defensive end. If one of those top four defensive ends in Dallas Turner, Leatu Latu, Jared Verse, or Chop Robinson's there, I promise you, for me, I'm going to have them graded higher than probably any receiver that would be available at pick 28. I have legit first-round grades on all four of those guys. I don't know if there's going to be a first-round wide receiver left. Same thing about defensive tackle. Johnny Newton, Byron Murphy II. If either of them are there at 28. Be hard to convince me that that's not the best player on the board. I'd love more interior pass rush. I'd love to have more waves of depth and impact on the defensive line. On the inside. Look at the offensive line. I don't have any idea what to expect from Lyle Collins. I have no idea what to expect there. Into his 30s, the last 3 years have had tons of injuries. Didn't really play at all last year. Who knows what he's like? And right now, your scheduled starter at left guard is David Edwards. He started 4 games over the last 2 years. Spencer Brown is in the last year of his contract. You have a big decision to make there. And this is a really outstanding offensive line class. There could be some first-round talents on the board versus whatever wide receiver you could pick that's likely to be similarly graded to what you can get in the second round. And how about safety? I did my film study for Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. That dude's a baller. He can play. You want to talk about impact playmaking upside in the secondary? Cooper DeJean is a baller. Athletic, good size. I guarantee you that DeJean is going to be a higher graded player for me compared to whatever wide receivers available at 28. This guy has unbelievable ball skills, physical, tackler, instinctive, super athletic. Would love to add Cooper DeJean. So you gotta have this type of mentality. Of course, you'd love to get the wide receiver that you love. But there's a really strong case that at other positions of need, like offensive line, like defensive line, like safety, there's simply going to be a better player. And you can wait and get a comparable wide receiver in the second round. Oh, by the way, I just spent a bunch of time talking about all these meaningful wide receivers that were acquired outside of the first round. So that, I think it's an important thing for us to be mindful of. And then my last talking point for you here is that barring a major move, whether that's a big trade up for one of those big three receivers, you trade for a veteran like Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins or something like that, your top weapons in the passing game for 2024 most likely already on the roster. Let's be real about it. Maybe you're underwhelmed, maybe you're not. But Dalton Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, James Cook, Dawson Knox, that's probably your top 5 guys in the 2024 passing game. And that doesn't factor in Mack Hollins or Ty Johnson or Justin Shorter or whatever, Andy Isabella, KG Hamler, whatever, whoever you want to insert, Quentin Morris. There are plenty of available targets, right? I believe that. I think there's on the low end 150, on the high end 220 targets available to be absorbed right now, even with what's already in place. But let's be realistic. I'm not saying a rookie cannot come in and make an impact. I am not saying that. But if you think the 2024 number 1 wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills is coming with pick 28 or later, I'd say that's very unlikely. They can make an impact. You've seen this. Like, rookie receivers can make an impact. But I'd say there is a strong case to draft more than one wide receiver, and that's where it really hurts not having a third rounder. Trade back, double dip could be the right move. Or pick some other player. Pick Cooper DeJean. Pick Chop Robinson at 28, and then get Javon Baker at 60, and then in the 4th round, get Malik Washington. These are all possibilities. There's so much more than get this player at 28. I'd love for the Bills to stick and pick Xavier Leggett. But if they didn't and they picked Cooper DeJean, and then at 60 they got Javon Baker, and then at 120 whatever they get Malik Washington, I'm going to love that. So let the whole thing come together before you lose your mind and go to sleep on April 25th after the Bills don't pick a wide receiver. Let's see how it comes together. The bottom line is this. Let's keep an open mind. There are plenty of ways to acquire meaningful players outside of a first-round pick. And while the Bills' most glaring need is at wide receiver, they do have other meaningful needs. And the depth of the wide receiver class should influence Brandon Beane's decision-making. And for me, it allows me to take a deep breath. And I hope it does you too. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. I really wanted to explore this angle, right? We've talked all about the possibilities of who they could get in the first round. But what if they don't? What if they don't? And if they don't, I'm going to point you right back to this episode on April 26th and encourage you to listen to it. And let's see how this entire picture comes together. Folks, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review the episode and the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.